Yo, what's up, guys? I wanted to make this video because this is a question I get asked a lot. It's a question I see people talking about a lot. And the general topic of this video is just going to be how can you get better at Dark and Darker? Like, I'm not going to be I'm not going to be giving you, like, step-by-step instructions on you should be doing this, this, and this, and it'll make you 100 times better, because there's nothing in the game that's going to do that, right? Like, there's nothing that you can do that's just going to instantly skyrocket you to being like, a top leaderboard player. That's just not how it works. However, there are some things that I think a lot of people don't consider and aren't necessarily aware of that if you were, it would definitely make you a better player, and it gives you a better foundation to become a better player. Because that's really like, that's how you become a better player. Really anything. You have to build yourself a strong foundation, and then just after you've got that stabilized, the more you play, the more you build on top of that, makes you better. All right, so one of the biggest things in this. Okay, also, just once again, a warning: nothing's really going to be on the screen. I'm mostly going to be talking, so feel free to throw it on, different tab, whatever you may do. But anyways, back to what I was saying. So one of the most important things in this game, it's not, mechanics. It's not like hitting all your melee hits, hitting all your shots. Those are important, yeah, but those are the thing is you don't even need to be the best mechanical player, right? I'll say I'm not one of the best mechanical players. I'll have plenty of times where I'll miss swings, miss headshots, that type of thing. For example, there's a reason I play a melee class. If I played a range class, I would be one of the worst players in this game. I cannot hit range shots. I'm really bad at aiming a crossbow, for example. I am not mechanically insane. I'll say it. I mean, I'm probably above average, but I'm definitely not one of the best mechanical players. That's not my thing. And you don't need to be. But however, one of the things you do need that I think that is very, very important is you have to be aware of your surroundings. And that seems, pretty obvious. However, a lot of people don't consider it. And so the number one skill I think you should have in this game is positioning. And I mean this like in a micro and a macro level. So for example, I think positioning in a fight is very important, and like it could be, could be the thing that wins you or loses you the fight. And also positioning on the map is very important, which is something a lot of people don't realize. This comes in knowing spawns, knowing hotspots, knowing like escape routes. All of those are very, very important. For like, I can just give you a really good example. Is if you take a fight and then like if you've ever taken a fight and then you immediately got third partied by somewhere else, it's like usually that's, I'm not going to say it's entirely preventable, right? But you can at least expect that it could happen, or like know there's a possibility. However, like, I'll see plenty of times where people will like take a fight and then they'll go third partied and they just instantly lose because they weren't ready for the third party. They had like no idea it was coming, or they're moving around the map in a way that they're like, because this is something else that I know a lot of people do, is you kind of just wander around the map and like you pick a direction when you spawn and just go. You don't really move with any purpose or any thought behind where you're going. You just, like I said, you just go, loot as you go, and that's it. That's something like those are two very key things. Is whenever you're moving around the map, you always want to try to be moving with some purpose. You want to be moving to some area. And it used to be, the main thing you'd prioritize is moving towards shrines. You don't have to do that anymore. It's not bad to do it because shrines still give you a, like, they give you a buff. It's not going to be like a fight winning, or like, like like I insta win the fight because I have a shrine, or I insta lose because you have a shrine anymore. But they still do give buffs. So hitting them is, it's definitely a good thing to do. But for the most part, if you want to move towards people, people generally move towards hotspots. What are hotspots? There'll be areas where there's elites like skelly champs, wraiths, that type of thing, or where there's like, big chests, lion's head, gold chests, that type of thing. And those are generally the places where people are gonna move. Also, there are some places other than that that are just, they're large open areas. They connect to a lot of places on the map. Think the bridge room with the broken bridge, first floor crypts. Think Foursquare. Think, like Pyramid where all the death skulls spawn. Those are areas where, generally speaking, people are going to end up because they're very open areas and you can spend a lot of time in there, if you're looting or if you're running into other people that are looking for PvP. Pyramid, for example, there's a lot of death skulls in there you can kill, a lot of chests you can loot. There's the under area where there is the royal coffin and the big chest, so a lot of time can be spent in there. Foursquare, people usually either they will run in there and they'll be in there clearing mobs for a long time, or they'll be going through there constantly back and forth looking for other people to PvP. Bridge room's the exact same thing. It's connected to a lot of places on the map, so there's always a lot of people going there from a lot of different areas. But back to what I was originally saying is one thing, like I said, positioning is very, very important. I've put out videos before about like individual team like positioning. That would be a bit more complicated to go over because it really comes down to like what class you're playing. So that's, if I was gonna make a video, like I could make a video on just individual positioning in a fight, but I would have to do it for each class. And because I mean, like a positioning for fighter is gonna be different than a positioning for a ranger, for example. It's just not the same. So what I'm gonna be talking about is, like I said, positioning in general over the map, which is that's what I've already been mentioning. And like I was saying, is whenever you are moving around the map, even if you see a fight, sometimes just because you see people, even if those people aren't in the best spot, it's not always worth it to take a fight because you don't know where other people are and you don't know if you can get third party. If you do know where everyone else is and you know that you can take the fight, good, that's fine, you should do it. However, if you don't have that information, sometimes it's just not worth it. That's one of the big things you have to consider in this game is risk versus reward. That is kind of like the theme of the whole game, and that applies in PvP too. For example, if I'm going to go and like if I'm like super geared, like if I'm in like this gear set right here, really good gear set, Faust of Honor, all that good stuff, and I see a team that's like default geared, I don't really have to think about what's happening because I know I'm just gonna run in, I'm gonna insta kill them, and I'm not really gonna have any sort of issue. However, if you flop that around, though, let's say I'm fighting a team just as geared as me, I know for the most part I'm going to have to use all my resources for that fight. Second wind, cleric spells, somebody might even die, so you might have to potentially get a res. So if I fight that team, and even if I win, let's say let's say no one on my team even dies. However, I have no second wind. We're all like, a bit lower HP. Almost all our spells are gone. And then a new team shows up, even if they're not equally as geared, they have all their resources because they didn't just fight someone and now they're ready to fight us. And so you're in a much worse position. And with the spell decreases for cleric, they have lower spell amounts. That's even more impactful. Like it's always been a thing, but now even more so. So that is something you always need to consider when you're fighting. And on that same hand, something else that you always want to have is you always want to have somewhere that you can like back off to if you need to, right? You never want to put yourself in a position where it's like, we have nowhere to go, so we are forced to fight this. Sometimes there's really nothing you can do. Like, you can't always control it. Like, this is general stuff. However, like I said, there will be times when it's like, we have to fight this. It doesn't matter how bad off we are. Just kind of has to happen. And if that happens, make the best of a bad situation. Do whatever you can. Sometimes you're going to win. Sometimes you're going to lose. However, what I was like one of the things I mean though when I'm saying like have an escape route is you don't want to be running through rooms aggroing PvE and not killing them. That's something that's very, very key. This isn't really positioning as much as just game knowledge. Is even if you see another team, you never want to aggro onto that team when you still have PvE aggro to you. For example, like let's say you're playing a generic team comp. Let's say I'm playing fighter, wizard, cleric, right? Because I mean I play that's just really generic, popular team comp. And let's say I run through and I aggro like Skelly Axeman, right? I run past it because, it's waking up and I'm going to that team. However, it's now alive and my cleric and my wizard have to deal with it. So they have the choice of, do we play this fight with our frontliner who's already running in? And then we have a skeleton on us the entire time. Because, like a red Skelly, like for example, if it hits a wizard, it's going to do easily 3/4, maybe even more. Sometimes it can almost kill them with one hit. With just from that, because how like they don't have that very high of HP, or they have to take the time to kill it, and then you're kind of on your own in a fight. Whereas if you just took the time to kill that PvE, then even if you didn't get the engage there on the fight, like let's say they're running from you and you're chasing them, right? Because I think that's a better example. Like if they're running from you, you're chasing them, you don't want to run through and aggro a bunch of PvE and then leave it for the people behind you to deal with it, because especially as a frontliner. Because this is segued into like me talking about like a frontliner positioning thing. But especially if you're the frontliner, you don't want to aggro PvE and leave your team to deal with it. Because when I talk about positioning, generally whatever your frontliner is will be the one that dictates how you guys move across the map. Because they're always going to be the one in front. Well, at least they should be. They're always going to be the one in front. They're always aggroing stuff. They're, going forward. They've disengaged first. So generally, if you're playing a frontliner, you will be the one dictating where your team goes, and you need to be very conscientious of things like PvE and where you're going. For example, One really good thing is you never want to end up in between teams. Because if you end up in between teams, you're in the situation of, okay, we now have to fight one of these teams, and whichever team we fight, we're just gonna get pincered by the other one. So the chance you actually win there, it's not impossible. However, it is very, very low than if you just, didn't do that. And I've had it happen to me plenty of times. Like I said, sometimes you just can't avoid these things. Sometimes you just end up in a really bad spot and there was nothing you could do about it. Or at least, like, you can't do anything about it at the time, and then you have to play with what you have. However, that is why I say you always want to be very aware of what's going on in the map. One really good example, another thing, is whenever you're playing, even high roller or low roller, it's easier in low roller because you have a death feed, right? Like, you can see how many people have died. Whenever the circle starts getting smaller and you haven't seen people and there's not a lot of people dead, you want to be really careful about taking fights, because that probably means there's a lot of people all in a very small area. So if you start fighting, they can hear you, they can come over, or even if they don't hear you, there's a chance they'll just wander on you because of how small the zone's going to be at that point. And once again, that's just something else you have to be very, very careful about. And then, this is, okay, moving on from positioning, this is something else that I've seen so many teams die to it. I've seen good players die to this. Is whenever you finish a fight, the first thing you should do, don't loot them. Unless you know you have to run away, and then you could, like, hit a body, grab some high priority gear, get out. That's fine. But whenever you finish a fight, number one thing you want to do, reset, get ready in case you have to do another one. Place campfires, get your spells back, all that type, any of those things. Those are the first things you want to do. And then, because the thing is, if you're sitting there resting beside those bodies, they're not going anywhere. However, if while you're sitting there looting, another team shows up, you're going to have to run away, or you're going to have to take a fight on a really big disadvantage, because if you're going to be playing down spells or down cooldowns, which is just not something you want to do. And I've seen so many teams die to this. So many. And it's like all you had to do was take 10 seconds to place down a campfire, sit at it for 5, and then you'd be perfectly back to full HP, back to pretty much full spells, ready to go if another team shows up. But because you didn't do that, another team showed up, they either killed you or they pushed you off the bodies and you had to run away. More likely than not, they end up killing you. And it just puts you in a way worse spot. So those right there. The second one's not even like, not even like a skill. It is just a tip. But those right there are two things that if you start doing more consistently, you will see yourself winning way more fights. You'll escape way more, and you will get way better gear. Positioning is, I think, the most key thing you need to learn in this game. This game is about 80 to 90% positioning when it comes to some of these fights. If you talk about even geared fights, that's what I mean. If there's if there's a giant gear discrepancy, then it doesn't matter how good your positioning is. You're probably still going to lose. But anyways, if you were talking about even geared fights, or even slightly slight difference, like if you have slightly worse than they do, if you outposition them, you can normally beat teams that are more geared than you. Because like I said, that is just the most important thing in this game that I feel like people should absolutely learn. And not enough people pay attention to it. Like I said, most people will just kind of walk around the map having no idea what's going on, with no plan or anything. And that's something that, that it's something you need to do. And I'm not expecting people to memorize every layout of every map, right? I don't do that. I don't know half the maps. However, some things you want to memorize, or at least have a general idea of. Remember, things you need to know. For example, res shrines. Those are something you really want to know. If one of your teammates dies and you need to get to a res, you don't want to be like, well, none of us know where it's at, so we can't res him. You want to have at least a general idea of where one might be. Because there's several on each map, and usually they're not in hard to find places. For example, one that most people don't know about is it's pretty easy if I had a video, but there's the room with all the stairs leading down, and there's a little cubby with a power shrine with 4 skeletons, and then behind that power shrine there's a crawl space where there's a respawn, a res shrine. Most people don't even know about that. It's really weird. I didn't know about it for a long time. And I'm not expecting you to know everything like that. However, really general things, you should know there's one in Pyramid Room where all the death skulls are. That one's really easy. There's one in the cage in the middle of like the 4 long hallways right beside Foursquare. That's another one that you should know. But just stuff like that. Like those are very like just small things that anyone can do. It's not like it doesn't take an insane player to memorize where a couple things are. Just things like that can increase your chances of doing good by so damn much. And people just don't do it, and they're just mediocre at the game forever. And then another thing. This one's a bit more complicated, so I'm not gonna. I mean, it's gonna sound alright. It's a bit more complicated, so I'm not gonna talk about it that much. But gear is one thing that a lot of people don't understand, and it's like what gear is good and what gear is bad. Because properly, if you properly gear, you can have like a really good kit, and you can go into high rollers and like blues. Hell, even greens and blues. Like, is it gonna be BIS? No, but you don't need like full purple gear to go into high rollers like most people think you do. Like, for example, something like these riveted gloves, 2 strength, 2 agility. I mean, then it has a 1 dead stat. Yeah, but these are good. Like, if you put these on, those are fine. Like, that's high roller good enough right there. And a lot of people just don't understand what stats are optimal on gear. So that's one thing, is like, that's not even like really, that's not even really like game knowledge. Or I mean, that's more game knowledge than anything. It's not like mechanical or anything. And that's something that you can just learn. Oh, hell, if you don't know, just ask people. But thing is, whatever class you play, you want to learn. Not, I mean, you don't need to learn everything there is to know about the class, right? But you want to learn at least general stuff. What are the stats that are good for my class? What are the builds that are good for my class? Because that's something else. Is if you want to do good, if you want to be a really good player in this game, the most important thing is learn positioning. Then one, or if you're a real sweat, play an optimal class. Look at what's good in the meta. Watch streams. Ask really good players. Watch YouTube videos. Find out what the best characters in the meta are, and pick whichever one you enjoy the most and play that. Play an optimal team comp. This is something a lot of people fail to do, and it's a really big thing. Team comps in this game are very, very important. For example, if you are playing if you're playing a bad team comp compared to someone that's playing like one of the best meta ones, then yeah, you're probably gonna lose. You're playing down like with a giant disadvantage because they decided they wanted to play good characters. And then, on that character you decide to play, learn what the best build is for it. Learn the perks you should run, the skills you should run. Look at stats that are good for the class. Look at armor choices, weapon choices, all that type of stuff. All of those things that are really simple, that, like I said, don't take any skill to do, can set you up and put you so far ahead than you're at right now. Just because, if you don't care about any of this and you don't care about being a crazy player and you just want to have fun, then go for it. Hop in goblin caves, use longsword, do whatever stuff you want. But if you really care about being one of the best players, then you really, there are just some things that you need to do. And even like me, for example, I love Fighter. Fighter's my favorite character in the game. I'm a Fighter main. Fighter's the only character I like, I really want to play. Last wipe, I basically didn't play Fighter at all because of how good Barbarian was. I pretty much one-trick Barbarian the entire wipe just because I felt the need to. Because I wanted to do good and I wanted to leaderboard. So I felt like I had to play Barbarian. It's true. Barbarian was the best character, in the game at that point. Buffball was super OP. Fighter, on the other hand, was really, really bad. So I just decided not to play it. And if that's what if you want to be good, that's what you have to do. Sometimes it takes giving up a character that you enjoy playing to play something else that's better. Just how it is. Kind of sucks, but I mean, that is the nature of competitive games. You can't always play the thing you want to play the most if you wanted to have, have the best performance. But other than that, I don't think, I mean, obviously there's more things I could talk about, right? Like, I mean, I could go into specifics. However, I think that's probably it for the most general knowledge. I really think positioning is one of the key things that separates, some of the best players from, like, even just good players. Like the good players from the greats. Positioning is something that can make you much, much better with very little effort. If you just so the next, whenever you're playing, just look at where you're at on the map. Try to pay attention to the stuff around you. Be wary of third parties, all that. Like, if you're in a spot where you're liable to get third partied, then sometimes taking the fight just isn't worth it. Or put yourself in a better position to take a fight. That's something that a lot of people do, is they'll see a team and they'll just because it's not even just about where you're at on the map, right? sometimes it's just about what's the comp you're fighting and how am I fighting them. For example, you don't want to have to funnel through a doorway into a wizard team because they're just going to spam fireballs or lightning strikes or chain lightnings at you or whatever that may be and kill you as you're coming through a doorway. On the other end, rangers, you don't want to be like running down a long hallway, like a long open hallway towards a ranger. That's something a lot of people say is like, wow, ranger's so broken. Wow, ranger needs nerfs. No, it doesn't. Ranger's weak. The problem is people don't understand how to play around it. When you see a ranger, you should be playing terrain, playing line of sight, doing all of that to prevent the ranger from getting as many shots off you as possible. Play around his reload. Play around him having to, knock the bow. All of those things, if you do it properly, ranger doesn't feel strong. And you're like, oh, well, you play, play fighter. Fighter's like the counter to ranger. No, I've played a lot of other classes. I'll play default gear cleric with 10% PDR or default gear fighter, and I don't have any issues with ranger. I play other classes with no shield, no issues with ranger, just because I know the way to play around them. So yeah, that is, I think, some of the most important things, just knowing how to gear, knowing what characters to play, team comps, and positioning. If you just, do, it's even like a tiny bit of research and you just start paying attention a little bit more rather than just like AFK braiding your games and start start paying attention to those things I just mentioned, I think you will see a noticeable increase to your gameplay. Just, you will be doing way better. You'll be surviving way more. You'll just be more successful overall. But anyways, that sums it up for this video. If you guys liked and enjoyed, as always, feel free to leave a comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I will be happy to reply/argue with you guys in the comments if you disagree with me, though. But, I'm right, so it is what it is. Anyways, I'll catch y'all later. Peace.